Hey! Knock it off! No! Okay, very surprising little bit of Apple news today. We have got, just randomly, 4 new Macs in January. I have no idea what's going on, but we have new M2 Pro and Max MacBook Pros, a new M2 and an M2 Pro Mac Mini. So there's a lot to talk about, and I want to start by diving into the M2 Pro and the M2 Max chip. So basically, think about these as a very similar treatment that the M2 got back in June. So we're bumping up core counts across the board, whereas the M1 Pro and Max could have either an 8 or a 10 core CPU. Now we're bumping up to 10 and 12. But it's important to note that the core count increases are coming in the form of efficiency cores. So that 12 core CPU has the same 8 performance cores, but now it has 4 efficiency cores. So that being said, I wouldn't expect a super huge amount of increased CPU performance this time around, though of course you know where to find all the coverage of that. So make sure to get subscribed and leave a like down below, because in a couple of days I'll be right back here talking about these new chips. But speaking of the new chips, let's talk GPU. Previously, you could get a couple of different options depending on binning. You could get a 14 or a 16 core GPU in the M1 Pro, and you could get a 24 or a 32 core in the M1 Max. Now we're bumping that up across the board, so you get a 16 core GPU as standard in the M2 Pro, and that bumps up to a 19 core for the full fat version, and then for the M2 Max, you're looking at 30 or 38 GPU cores. So we do still have the same basic structure of a double binned 14-inch MacBook Pro and then different binning versions for the M2 Pro and the M2 Max. So what about performance? Well, Apple gave us a little bit of an idea of what to expect when we start to get our hands on these chips. And well, honestly, it's a pretty familiar story. Apple claims that for image processing, thanks to the increased core count in the M2 Pro, we're looking at a 40% improvement over the M1 Pro. Now, Apple's also claiming that their new neural engine has an increase of up to 40% in performance over the previous generation. It looks like basically across the board, we're seeing an increase, just very slight, in CPU and GPU. I think GPU is going to be the more noticeable one because of those additional cores. CPU, again, wouldn't expect a ton. So now let's talk about the Macs that these new chips are appearing in. And well, it's a very familiar story here as well. If you look at the M2 Pro and the M2 Max MacBook Pro press images, you're basically going to notice that the only thing different is the wallpaper. There is nothing in terms of design or color options that has changed this time around. And honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed about that. I think I'm a little bit tired of space gray and silver. We've had those options for 7 years. I really was hoping to see Starlight and Midnight. I think that would have been really nice, but, you know, not super impactful on actual purchasing of these MacBook Pros. What could be impactful are some changes to the battery life, because Apple has bumped the estimates by about 2 hours on both the 14 and the 16. They're now saying up to 22 hours of battery life on the 16-inch MacBook Pro. That's pretty hefty. And the 14-inch is now up to 20, which puts it on par with the M2 MacBook Pro. So one of the only benefits of buying that machine, which was battery life, is now no longer there. So if there was anybody left who thought that the 13-inch M2 MacBook Pro was a good value, they're probably gone now. Another big thing that could matter to a lot of video professionals is these new MacBook Pros can now finally handle 8K video output over HDMI. This is something that really bothered me about the previous generation M1 based MacBook Pros. They were limited to 4K at 60 FPS, and that was just kinda sucky. But now we finally have 8K. Configuring these new MacBook Pros is basically the same as before, but there are some limitations as to how you can mix and match. For example, we do now have up to 96 gigabytes of unified memory on the M2 Max variant, but you have to specify the full-fat 38-core GPU. You cannot configure the 30-core M2 Max with 96 gigs of RAM. But arguably of more significance than the chips themselves is the machine that Apple is now putting them in, and that is the Mac Mini. The Mac Mini is a holdout from the original round of Apple Silicon all the way back in November 2020, but now we get a $100 price cut as well as these new M2 chips and the M2 Pro. This is something that is going to really be a game changer and plug the gap between the lower end Mac Mini and the Mac Studio. Previously, we had a bit of dead space there, but starting at $1299, you can pick up an M2 Pro Mac Mini that comes equipped with 4 Thunderbolt ports and comes with the double binned variant of the M2 Pro. So that's going to be the 10-core, 16-core GPU. For an extra $200, you can bump that up to the full-fat 12 and 19-core, and you can configure this thing with 32 gigabytes of memory as well as 8 terabytes of storage, and it's going to cost over $4,000. So yeah, maybe that high-spec one isn't for you, but I'm really, really glad that the Mac Mini now has a more powerful sibling. This is fantastic. I'm going to be getting one. I might even put it in a Wii if I'm feeling a little spicy. I'm very curious to tear that machine down and see if there are any internal changes that were made to fit that more powerful machine inside of the same Mac Mini chassis we all know and love. Now, interestingly enough, alongside all of these announcements, Apple released a very, very suspiciously keynote-looking video. It's 18 minutes, and guys, let's just state the obvious here. I am 100% certain that all of these machines were supposed to come out in October. Remember when we got all those iPads as a press release? Well, you look at this release today, you look at the way that the Apple video starts off. It's literally the second half of a transition from a keynote. I believe with nearly 100% confidence that Apple wasn't ready, didn't have enough of these manufactured or something, and they just canceled the keynote, and then they pulled out this 20-minute clip and just released it in January. Apple hasn't released Macs in January since, like, 2010. So, yeah, that's my conspiracy theory. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. I can't wait to get my hands on these machines, and I hope you guys will be watching. So, as usual, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.